Welcome to the With Series Potential podcast, where we share our journeys breaking into TradPub, how we're leveling up our craft to get there, and spill all the publishing tea along the way.
Hi, I'm Anna Hirsch, writing horror novels.
I'm Ivy T. Woods. I write romantic fantasy.
And I'm Zilla, writing as RJ Hawthorne, and I am also a horror author.
So we are three unpublished authors working to get published. Anna, can you tell us what you're working on?
Sure. So, again, I write horror. I started out writing fantasy and discovered that I just wanted to focus on the creepy stuff. So my current project is called The Banshee of Clan Murtaugh. It follows the black sheep of a powerful 14th century Irish family and his forbidden love story with the Banshee, who's haunted his household for generations. But as the Black Plague closes in, he has to choose between the living and the dead. I am revising this as part of the Smooch Pit mentorship program with my amazing mentor, and we're almost done with line edits, so I'm preparing to take this back out into the query trenches and see what happens.
When I grow up, I want to be able to pitch my book like
Yep.
Anna. Holy moly. that was beautiful. I was deeply
so
impressed.
good.
Thanks. I've only been practicing it for like 2 years.
Yeah. Well, it was great. So like kudos to you. Snaps and applause. I'm Ivy Two Wits. I am an agented author. I am agented with Janklo Nesbitt. I write romantic fantasy that kind of straddles the line between more classic romantasy and normal kind of epic fantasy. So I like to kind of think of myself as a stepping stone from like Rachel Gillig to Brandon Sanderson. Where we have those kind of in-depth romantic relationships, but we also have very strong world building and A plots. So I am currently about to go on submission. We're gonna count in the delay for this. I'm about to go on submission with my first novel, Undying or The Land of Undying Summer, and I am almost done draft one of my second novel, Sculptor of the Winds, which is the first in a two-part duology. Zilla?
Oh my gosh, I can't follow you both. So I am Zilla, writing as RJ Hawthorne, and I am very recently agented, just right before the new year. I am with Madwoman Literary Agency, and I've gone, like Anna, from fantasy to dystopian to horror. So my horror is about a sentient and hungry hotel that feeds on the sins and secrets of a tight-knit group of college friends.
And I've read both of their books, and they're both phenomenal, and they've are doing edits since then too, so I'm sure they're even more phenomenal. They're good.
So many
You're gonna be excited
edits.
when they hit your shelves.
All right, so for leveling up today, I want to talk about something that is very close to me right now with the stage I'm at in my project, and that is improving line level craft. So for me, this is something that I actually didn't really work on for the first year or so that I was writing novels. And that for me is because I previously had a career as a professional writer. So I felt like I got this down. Like, why do I need to work on it? And that got me there for a while. But at a certain point, I really wanted to dial in and see, like, maybe this is a strength of mine, but how can I take it to the next level and really lean into my strengths? So there are two different things that I want to talk about today that I think are both great tools. And the first one is economy of words. This is something that I did a lot professionally because in my previous career, I was a copywriter writing advertisements, and a lot of times you only have maybe 5 to 8 words to get your message across, sometimes multiple messages because creative briefs and all that. But when it comes to novels, you might think like, okay, we've got 80 to 100,000 words, give or take, to write this whole story. That's a lot of words. But paper's expensive, your story's big, and there's so many things that you want to get on the page that you really do need to make sure that every word counts. And I think for me right now, my book was underwritten at first. And I had to go back in and add a lot of content, but now I'm at the phase where I get to pare it down and make sure that all the words are doing what I want it to. And there are times when it makes sense for a sentence to have more words. There's times where it makes sense for a sentence to have less. But I'm kind of going through and looking for the places where I am saying things twice, looking for the places where I'm saying something with 3 words that could only be said in 1 word, times where I could remove stage direction. A lot of times it's just like She sat up. No, she sat. She went down to the floor. She sat on the floor. She held the bucket in front of her. She held the bucket before her. Just little places where you can remove friction because the reader already knows what's going on, and that extra word is just going to slow them down and it's taking them away from the real juicy words. So by paring back the words that don't need to be there, it gives you room to really lean in when you want those extra words, when you want to get a little purple with your atmosphere. I love purple. When you
You are
want,
very lyrical.
yeah. And like I want to use my words for that fun stuff. Like I want to add a juicy adverb in there, and not necessarily a bunch of suddenlies and buts and that's. So that's the concept of economy of words. Here is a few different ways that I make this happen. Number one is retyping. I don't really recommend this when you're at your final line editing stage because retyping does introduce a lot of typos to the process unless you're just really good at typing. But retyping like paragraph by paragraph or even scene by scene from one document into another really helps me notice which words just don't need to be there because my fingers are lazy. I'm asking a lot of them, and if I see a word that probably doesn't contribute to the sentence, my brain just wants to skip over it. So I just retype and follow my instincts when it comes to what words need to go. It also helps me notice any clunky phrasing. And then like the next evolution of that, which I think works better when you're at that final line editing stage, is just
Can I ask a
speaking.
question? Sorry to
Oh
like,
yeah,
can you talk a little
no,
bit
of
more about
course.
like how you trained your instincts to like know?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think a lot of it is just reading, like reading books with gorgeous prose and kind of just soaking that up. I think another part of it is also like finding your crutch words. So something that I did when I was revising my first book, because it was an absolute behemoth. It was like 140,000 words at one point, which is just ridiculous. And I eventually got it down to 114 to query. I cut several thousand words just from going down a list of crutch words and searching through my manuscript and deleting the ones that didn't need to be there. So that taught me a lot about words that I didn't even realize were taking up extra space until I went through and I deleted 200 that's or 57 suddenlies, you know?
Can I
So
say
I,
my two are
yes,
still
please.
and instead? I don't know why I
Oh,
love using those. What are yours?
I use managed to a lot. And like I can
Oh,
always just cut that. But I found with my second book, I'm cutting more of them as I draft.
yeah.
I'm not going to have to do the same level of line editing that I think I did when I went with Undying Summer because I'm watching for them as I write, which is probably not a good thing, but like we both know I edit as I write, and it
Hmm.
just I catch them as they come out. I'm like, no, I need to find a better way to say that. So I'm hoping it'll be less intense this time.
yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, Ivy, because that's also something I wanted to touch on is like that the really annoying process of going through the crutch words does kind of train your brain. And so I felt like my draft for this book compared to my first book was so much cleaner. And going into my line edits, I was like, I can easily cut 2,000 words out just by looking at crutch words. And I actually can't because I'm using way less crutch words than I did the first go around. It's fine because I don't actually need to cut that many words. This book again was underwritten. It's fine. I love to chop. Let me chop.
Let me chop.
And I think there's a certain level of crutch words you need to have in order for it to still be voicey. And I think
Yep.
it does depend on the style that you're writing in. So like Anna, you're very gothic, very lyrical. I know for me I'm a lot more commercial in some
Hmm.
aspects, particularly in like dialogue. And for that, it's like, no, you need the that's and the justs and the suddenlies, especially in the dialogue, because it really helps you kind of get into that character's brain because that's how people talk. But especially when you're outside of the dialogue, it's like, yes, let's go for that economy of words. Or I'm obsessed with Quentin Sanderson's lecture series. I've watched them so many times. He has something called the pyramid of abstraction, which is kind of going from abstract to concrete, and that really aligns a lot with what you were saying with kind of the economy of words idea.
Yeah, and that's a really great point about knowing when you want those words to add voice and add color. And so it really is just a matter of developing your palette and knowing when is this word just getting in the way Or is it actually like adding a nice rhythm to the sentence? Is it making the dialogue feel realistic? So I like to cut the words that aren't serving me so I have rooms for the extra ones that are just there because I like them.
I found the read aloud feature in in Microsoft Word, which you guys knew I did for my last kind of edit before I sent my book back to Kyra for like the final one. I did the read aloud. I found that was so useful for finding those crutch words where or words that you're saying multiple times because I don't know if you guys do this, but like I sometimes have a word where I'm like, oh, that's a really good word, and then I use it like three more times in 2 pages, especially while I'm drafting, and they're nowhere else in the manuscript. And I'm just like,
Yeah,
that's a really nice word. I'm going to use that a bunch of
it's your
times.
unintended
Um,
echo.
yes, yeah,
Hmm.
that's a great way to put it. But yeah, I found the read aloud feature was so helpful in catching those, in catching just kind of filler words or being like, this sentence does not flow properly without that filler word. So putting it back in where it was maybe previously cut.
Yeah, agreed. You need that flow.
Read aloud is great too. If it sounds good on the Microsoft Word robot voice, then you know it's going to be fire in any other format.
Oh yeah. When fingers crossed it eventually gets to an audiobook narrator or all those things.
It will, we're manifesting. Economy of words was the first thing. The next one is sentence structure. So this is the book How to Write Stunning Sentences by Nina Schuyler. 100 simple exercises from beloved authors to improve your writing style. And this is really great for, I think, in between drafts for when you're preparing to lay down fresh prose on the page. Essentially, she has like each chapter is about a different type of sentence structure, in terms of like, is it left branching, is it right branching, all these things that she gets into in the book. She gives examples from famous authors. She goes really into depth about like why the sentence works on like a rhythmic level. It's so cool. And there also is an accompanying journal that I have too, where there's like basically prompts. Here's the type of sentence. Now you can try to mimic it either by writing a new sentence, or maybe you take a sentence from your work in progress and rewrite it. I find this exercise is really helpful just to get new types of sentences into my brain. And if you're someone who's looking at your draft and like every sentence in a paragraph is starting with I or the, and it's just feeling really repetitive, I think this is a really great way to just train new types of sentence structure and make your writing more interesting and dynamic and lush.
So, Anna, what do you typically like? What's your typical comfort sentence structure then that you had to maybe like get away from?
Oh man. I mean, I do just love like a straightforward sentence. So for me, like the example I said, I find I have a lot of sentences that start with I or the character's name if it's in third person, or they start with the. And so I feel like when I have sentences with an unusual structure, it's usually something that just kind of like it's not intentional, it just comes out that way. I'm usually trying to create an effect, such as like delaying what the subject of the sentence or something like that. Um, it's hard for me to articulate why I do things when it comes to sentence structure because I'm just like a lifelong reader and writer, and sentence structure is the thing that always feels innate to me. So it's hard for me to articulate like why I do what I do. Um, but I do feel like these notebooks really help break out of my ruts and just like introduce different ways of sentences.
I feel like my default sentence structure, the one that I end up with like a lot of he she's. Like I definitely do stage direction, especially in like earlier drafts that I have to cut and vary things. But I end up doing like a she something, comma, something ing to the blah 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is I feel like my go-to is that and I have to go in and do that.
I definitely have that one a lot too.
Same.
Or
But
like,
It's a good sentence structure.
as she blah blah blah'd, blah
Yep.
blah blah.
I definitely have the clauses, but for me, it's always these fragments. I love a fragment. I put them everywhere. It's definitely like I think a voicey thing, but I can see how, you know, changing
But
that
you
up.
write in first person though.
Hmm.
So I think in first person you can get away with a lot of that and just in terms of like stream of thought and consciousness.
Well, that and just like that urgency and that action and like increasing the pace within that. Like I tell myself that's the reason I do it. Is it actually? I'm not sure, but I definitely, I'm not gonna lie, just ordered the book and I'm gonna look at it and see what I can do to kind of like up my atmosphere a little bit because that's not a place where you need fragments, you know?
Love that. I mean, I am a sentence fragment apologist. I think they have their place and they're great. But it's all about variety and like being intentional and having more tools in your toolbox.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that finishes up for leveling up.
Yes.
Well done.
Okay, so that brings us to our main topic for the episode, which is querying rules and which can be bent or broken. So I thought a good way to start this would be just a brief overview of kind of what our querying journeys looked like. Kind of going through our normal A to Z order, and then we can kind of talk about what the querying rules are, assuming that our listeners have not queried or don't know what any of the querying rules are. Start at the very basics and then kind of get more complex from there. So Anna, what has your querying journey looked like so far?
Goodness. Okay, so I've queried two books. I started with my fantasy novel, and I queried that back in like around May to June 2025. I didn't query it for very long. So all three of us applied to Rev Pit. All three of us didn't get in. No, but it's fine. We found each other. We're here. And so following that experience, I polished up my manuscript. I queried it around May to June. I sent about 60 queries. I got one full request, which is still outstanding to this day. And I do think.
I'm so salty about that on your behalf.
Listen. It still exists. It's still out there. And that agent is going to get a nudge from me very soon. I ultimately decided to discontinue querying this novel because, well, my request rate wasn't very good. And I felt like I had done what I could with this book, with this concept. At this point, I was a good way into drafting my novel that I'm working on right now, The Banshee of Clan Murtaugh, and I was just absolutely in love with it. I realized that I wanted to pivot to be more horror versus dark romantic fantasy, which is what I was writing before. And I did feel like this book had such a better chance in the market. I just knew that like the concept was good because every time I talked about it, people would go, ooh. And I just never got that with my first book. It's also a lot more of a contained story.
It's very high concept.
It's super high concept. And I couldn't really find other books about banshees in the context that I wanted them in. So I felt like it was something unique, but also kind of on trend because at this time I was seeing inklings of the horror romance trend popping off, gothic coming trending a lot. Yes, and that's only continued, which is really great. So I stopped sending out queries for that first book and I just went full into writing Banshee. I began querying Banshee in September, and I also applied to Smooch Pit right around that time. I kind of used Smooch Pit as my deadline for getting ready to query. I was like, I'm not going to get into Smooch Pit. I'm a horror writer. And then I proceeded to send out a lot of queries. I ended up getting a bunch of full requests right away for Banshee, which was super exciting.
On your honeymoon.
But then yeah, well, I got two full requests when I was on my honeymoon. I did send one full request when I was at the club in Santorini at 3 a.m.
I love it.
And another one when I was about to go into a pasta making class. So pro tip, if you're querying and you're going to go on vacation, save all your files to your phone so that way you can just upload and send. But it really nothing was happening other than like kind of the initial rush. Like it was kind of a standstill. I did get a bunch of rejections. I got like 12 form rejections on my honeymoon, which sucked. And then I got back and I got into Smooch Pit. So I had to pause all my queries. I know some people who got into mentorship programs withdrew their queries. I just reached out to all the agents who had my query or my full and said, I got into this program. Would you be willing to wait until I am finished the revision? And some of them replied and were like, yes, I'll wait. Some of them asked me to withdraw and resubmit when I'm ready. Some of them didn't reply at all, but that's fine. That's just agents for you. And I'm still going to send it to them for the most part. And I've just been polishing up my manuscript. I did a big revision. I'm doing line edits. I've been working on my agent list and my query package, which includes my query letter and my synopsis. And I am probably going to begin querying again within the next 2 weeks. So at the time of recording, it's January 21st. I'm aiming to query on February 1st.
And we're like ready for the blood in the water.
I'm
Oh
ready.
yes, absolutely. We're so hype. Also, that just illustrates how much of a delay we're working on because I am a mom and I need time to be able to edit all of these. So just so you know. Um, yeah, I am so excited for Anna to dive back into the query trenches. Like I'm so excited and hyped for you. I'm gonna live vicariously through you and
Oh,
pretend that my own things aren't
absolutely.
happening.
Yep.
It's gonna be great. Dopamine hits through Anna. Like I loved when you got your offer, Zilla, because I was able to like live vicariously through you again. It was great.
Oh my gosh, the longest 3 weeks ever. But let's go into you, Ivy, because you had a really interesting.
Yeah.
So I am what people, in some ways, what people like to refer to as a unicorn. Because I wrote one book and then I got agented off the first book I ever wrote. So that is not typical. That is quite atypical. Most people will write more than one book. I don't know if there's an average out there in terms of how many books, but it
I think it's between 4 and 7 from what I've heard from other podcasts.
and I've definitely seen a lot of variants like in the Discord servers that we're in. There's some people that are on 12 books. There's some people who are on one book. So it does vary a lot. Um, so I also applied to RevPit. That was my big thing. RevPit submissions were happening right around when I was due with my second baby. And when I was going out to my beta feedback things, but I had a workable manuscript, so I'm like, that's fine. I can send that out. It was not as polished as I would have wanted to send to anybody else, but it was like, yeah, it's fine. It's a developmental editing contest. Um, I got shortlisted by all three of the RevPit editors that I applied to, but I did not get chosen. Which is fine because in hindsight, I got a lot of really great feedback from my critique partners and beta readers that I was able to apply to my manuscript, and then I started querying in late May. I was what I call a shotgun querier. I did start with a smaller batch of quick responders just to see how things were hitting. And on my first day in the trenches, I got my first full request. I was like, oh my God. And then, nothing happened for a while. Um, so I got my offer from my agent, Kyra, at the end of September. So I was in the query trenches for just under 4 months. I signed with her mid-October because we had obviously the 2 week wait, and then just a delay to sign the contract because she was out of office. So I signed with Kyra. In the course of my querying journey, sent 166 queries, I think. And she was near the end because she wasn't on Query Tracker, so I actually didn't know she was an agent until somebody in the Discord mentioned her. So I was like, yeah, shoot a shot. And it obviously worked out, so I'm quite happy about that. I think I received it might be 7 full requests and 1 partial request while I was in the trenches. So it wasn't like an absurdly high number, but it wasn't super low. Um, since I got agented, I have edited a few times and we're going to be going out on submission soon. But that was my very short and again, atypical time in the trenches. So we should not be measuring ourselves to that if you are listening. That is not normal at all.
But I also want to shout out like your persistence and your strategy in querying, because you did query so many agents that like some people might have given up sooner and then you wouldn't have found Kyra. So I think that really goes to show that you have to be your own best advocate when querying, and like you can't leave any stone unturned because you just never know who's going to fall in love.
And your girl loves the dopamine hit. Like I spent so many queries, and like sometimes I definitely did the thing where like you're feeling sad or whatever, is you just send out some queries
Oh,
to agents that you wouldn't normally
absolutely.
have queried because they have red or yellow flags. So I found when I did get my offer, I did not nudge everybody I still had a query out with. I nudged all my fulls and then I nudged agents who I'm like, I feel like from what I know about you, you could be at least equal to the offer that I had. So there was a lot of agents that I just didn't nudge entirely because going into it, I'm like, I know your agency reputation. I can see kind of your sales on Publishers Marketplace. I don't think you are equal to the offer that I have on the table. So that is something that you have to do as well. That did mean that I only got one offer. Theoretically, if I was nudging all the agents on my list, I could have had more, but it would have kind of been wasting everybody's time, and that was some of mine. logic with not choosing to.
Yeah, you knew Kira was the one for you, and yeah,
Oh, she's great.
she's great.
Her, like, I love the way she does edit letters. Like, she always does them as questions, and it's chef's kiss. And yeah, so easy to
Yeah.
talk to. Love her. And like, we trashed the Legend of the Seeker TV show on the offer call. I don't know how much more perfect you can.
Love.
I don't know if you guys watched that, but it's so bad. It was the worst adaptation. Like, it was almost as bad as the Aragon movie. We'll put it there.
I
That's
didn't
our
even know
litmus
there
test.
was an Aragon movie. That's where I'm at.
Oh, don't watch it.
No, I won't.
Zilla, your time in the querying trenches, please.
I think my time in the querying trenches was a little bit more typical. I actually started querying in 2024 with a fantasy with a romantic subplot. I don't know that I would call it a romantic fantasy. It was definitely a lot more about my main character. But before that, I did get into a mentorship, Right Team Mentor program. It was amazing. I still talk to my mentor. I think that mentorships are incredible, but I didn't get an agent with that book. I did end up getting 10 requests. So I think that I learned a lot. I think that it was a good book to start with, but ultimately a book without an offer is still a book without an offer, and you've got to write the next thing. So for me, I think I had just read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and I was like, I'm obsessed with the Hunger Games, as I think a lot of people are. But Snow is like my guy. Like, I love his character.
Really?
I love a villain. Yeah, I love a villain. I love he's not even really gray. He's like burnt charcoal, right? Because he's not completely evil.
He's morally black.
Yeah, he's morally black. We'll say that. Like he's making some choices. But I knew that I wanted,
But sometimes those are the most fun characters to read
and they're the most
about.
fun to
Because it's
write
like, what are
about.
they gonna do next? They're not. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it gave me an idea to write a dystopian where I got to write a snow type character, but it wasn't my main character. It was like my main antagonist, which was super fun. I did end up using some video games, some like off the course comps, which I'm sure we're going to talk about when we get into like what rules to break. Um, and it led me into like more of a horror, more of a slasher vibe, which is also like just my thing. I love a B horror slasher. Um, and I ended up getting 14 requests on that book and still no offer. Um, and I queried that from 2024, no, yeah, 2024 to 2025, so September to May. And then in August, I queried the book that got me my agent, which is Murder Night at Hotel Adair, which is straight horror, definitely a slasher vibe, but so it's like a psychological haunted house.
It is a lot like The Shining.
Yeah, it's like The Shining or Handyman Method, which I love. Um, and so that book, I ended up doing a lot of pitch contests, which ended up getting me a lot of requests from there, as well as I still have a full out for my first book. I still have, or had, I still had a couple fulls out for my second book by the time I started querying my third. Um, and then when I started querying in August, I queried my agent day one. Um, and it was just on vibes. Kind of, I didn't do like a shotgun, I didn't do like a first round because I knew I already had so many like full requests from these pitch events, and these people have seen my writing before, so it's like I just went with it. Like I knew who I wanted. I knew, you know, kind of the outcome that I was reaching for. And I ended up with 27 requests, um, including editor interest, and 100 and what 24 days later I finally got my offer. So very, very slow in between, but yeah, I ended up with two offers and chose the first, which I'm not gonna lie, I knew it was gonna be her. I knew she was gonna like this book, she just needed to read it. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
kind of my
I
query.
remember talking about
Oh my
that.
gosh,
Yeah.
she
And
mm,
The frustration.
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
but she's an enigma, so
eh, yeah.
Hmm.
But she's iconic
oh,
is
she
the other thing too.
is.
She never
She
sleeps.
doesn't.
Yes. She's an icon. She's a
Um,
legend.
I do think that is a big thing for baby queriers to understand. is how long it takes
Mm-hmm.
for most agents to read a full. It is not the same, even for a fast query reading agent, it will take them longer to read a full, particularly if they like it and they get all the way through. Um, I know for my agent, I had my, or she could contact me, set up a call a week after um she asked for my full. So she read it very, very quickly, and I was like, what the
Mm-hmm.
heck? But part of that was because she's not on Query Tracker, so she doesn't get the same volume of submissions, I think, because you have to look a little bit harder to find her. And I am currently on maternity leave. I'm not working, so sent her that manuscript 3 minutes after she emailed me. So she told me on the offer call, she just kept reading. So I think she just
Yeah.
read it over the weekend. Um, so when you can capitalize on sending it really, really quickly, I think that's a really, really good thing, which kind of leads me into my first rule for querying, which is have your manuscript be done. If you are a fictional author, and we are talking specifically to fiction authors, we don't know anything about nonfiction. You need to have your manuscript done and completed when you start querying. That is what agents already say. Having said that, this is the episode about how you can bend and break um, querying rules. And I will say I did send my first few queries when I was not done my final editing pass. Where would you guys say is your line for sending out queries? Because somebody could respond that day. I got a full request on my first day and my thing wasn't done.
Yeah.
So
What's your line?
I think it's important to talk about what done means, because for people who are like really new to this, done does not mean like I just finished my first draft. Like you want to go through revisions, you want to have beta readers, and make sure that like the story itself is done. But that said, my comfort level with this, and this is going to vary depending on everyone, but I feel comfortable sending out queries when my first 50 pages, because that's kind of like the upper limit of what agents would ask for at the beginning, is really, really polished. But say I still need to like do one more read through to check little tiny things through the rest of the manuscript, and I know I could finish that up in a couple of days. That's kind of
Yeah.
the point where I feel comfortable sending queries. That's almost where I'm at right now with my book. So
You're
um,
Yeah.
eager.
I'm
I'm
eager.
ready. I'm ready to go. But like for example, in my situation, I have a bunch of agents who have my full, and I don't want to like send that prematurely, so I may send out queries to agents that don't have my full a little bit earlier, but like I'll just be doing like one final pass to make sure that my whole manuscript is in good shape before sending it over.
Yeah. That's about my line too, was I can finish it and have it done to my satisfaction in a couple of days. That was my line when I sent them out. And I think that would be, if I had to query again, that would be my line, is because you don't want to get a full request from an agent and then send it 3 weeks later. Unless, of course, you have a very, like if you're on vacation or something, that those things happen. But you want to capitalize on that interest where you can.
Yeah, you also don't want to send a manuscript that's been like proofread but not developmentally edited, Like you need to tackle the big problems. You can't skip that step.
It's like baking. You don't serve something to somebody when you have all the ingredients in the bowl. You serve it when it's fully cooked.
So that being said, how many drafts do you guys typically do before you feel like it's cooked?
I think it's going to be different for me this time than it was my first time because I know more about writing a book this time. So we've talked about this before, but I edit as I draft because I have one friend who reads my early drafts and I send it to her chapter by chapter, and she's phenomenal. Love her. It's great because she will it kind of give me like the comments and the dopamine hits, so I have incentive to keep going, and I would do it anyways. But like, it's nice to have that. So I do my drafting, words from scratch, rewrite it all, send it to her, and that's just like kind of a positivity pass thing. Um, and then I go through and I do like a whole edit. Like this time I have a whole bunch of notes on what I want to change for my next thing. Like I've got 1,000 words of editing notes already, and I haven't even read my whole book to kind of go over it. So that would be my third one, and I'm gonna count all of that as kind of one pass because I would go through, I do the big things, and I'd probably go through and line edit it all, things like that. But that's all part of one thing. Then I would send it to betas or CPs. get feedback based on that, and then probably do one final edit. So that's four.
Mm-hmm.
That's about what I did for Undying Summer at this point. Um, at that point, I would probably be sending it to my agent without going back to any other CPs or beta readers, but that's about where I'm at.
Anna, what about you? When you first started querying Banshee, how many drafts had you done?
I queried my second draft of Banshee, which was
She's a monster.
definitely a little bit premature. However, I should say I do really thorough drafts, and I am a pantser, which does like require a certain amount of like developmental editing, on the back end. But I had been thinking about this idea and kind of planning the themes and the characters for about a year and a half, I think, before I began actually drafting it. So the first draft came out pretty clean, and then the second draft was me just kind of making it into the version of the story I wanted to tell. I felt good about that. I had a couple of beta readers, including Ivy, and I made a few minor tweaks based off of that and like one proofread. And then I started querying. I mean, I got full requests from it, so clearly something was working. However,
I read it. Your second draft made me mad because of how good it was. Like, I could not believe that was your second draft.
well, then the thing is, it's historical fiction, and then I got a mentor who happened to, study that part of history. So I did a lot of edits for, like adding setting and adding historical details. So the story didn't change too much in my third draft. It was a lot of just beefing up the historical setting. And then now I'm doing line edits, which is kind of like a fourth draft. And I did 4 drafts before I sent out my first novel too, so it's kind of lining up there.
Yeah, your book is very, very research intensive,
Yeah.
which I used to say that I write fantasy because it's not research intensive, and now I'm on YouTube watching like tours of all these different galleons
Yeah, I've
and
seen your
videos on
tide
writing.
pattern charts.
Yeah. Yeah, I had to do like thin level math and things because I made my world have multiple moons, which is for a functional reason, but it makes tides weird and I'm writing a boat book, so it's oh, it's a time. Zilla, what about you? How many drafts?
My first book was about 5 or 6, and then my second two were 3 drafts. But I also edit as I go, and I have one CP read my read my first draft. I do heavy edits there, and then I have her reread, and then another CP read my third, or read my second, so I can do a final line edit and then send.
I think it's a really good idea to have different CPs who do different things. Like I wrote romantic fantasy and I have one friend who is a self-pub romance author
Mm,
and like I love her books. Her like they're phenomenal and like I'm not a big self-pub reader, but I will read everything she puts out forever. She's one of my CPs and I'm always like, "Yes, please tell me what my romance plot lines are doing. What are you seeing? What can I improve in those?" Because that's her
yeah,
area of expertise and I love having her for that. It's good to have people where you know what their strengths are, kind of as a beta reader or as a CP.
completely agree.
Uh, so with that, yeah, have the manuscript done. That's your first rule of querying. We went on a good tangent there. Yeah, manuscript has to be done and like fully cooked, not half baked. Um, big one is only one agent as an agency. Um, because they don't want to compete with each other. There are some exceptions to this, so I'm not going to call them out by name because I know it'll go crazy, but there's one agent who is very, very slow, and she specifically said on social media that you can query other agents at her agency, and she's not going to mind that. I don't know how happy the other agents at the agency are about it, but that is one thing that has happened. Um, would you guys bend or break this rule?
I would bend it if it's like a CNR,
Yeah,
which I think CNRs are really fuzzy. CNR means like consider no response,
yeah.
a
Closed,
rejection.
no response.
Yeah, exactly. Closed, consider, whatever.
Yeah,
No response is
it's
the important part.
yeah.
Some agents just like don't respond to all queries. They only
Yeah.
respond to the ones they're interested in, and they might say
Like
like,
PS Literary has that
yeah,
as a policy. They only
mm-hmm.
respond to queries that they're interested in.
Yeah, PS Literary is also a no from one means no from all agency, meaning that you can
Which is
only
big.
query one agent
Yeah.
there on a project. So just pick the best one and then send it off. But yeah, if an agent maybe doesn't have a specific CNR policy listed on their website, but it's been a really long time, I would just query another agent at that
Yeah.
agency.
I wouldn't
Um,
bother withdrawing, especially if
yeah,
it's an email query. If it's query manager, there's a decent chance you're going to have to withdraw it in order to query another agent because they have settings and they can see if you have a query out to another agent at that agency. So query manager kind of forces you to withdraw in order to query another one because they can see you still have it open. In some cases, that will actually block your query. For email, I don't bother if it's long enough that I'm considering it closed no response, which can get tricky sometimes because you might have an agent that's just like super duper behind and it's actually not a CNR, but you assumed it is, and you're like, oh shoot. So that's where things can get a little tricky.
that's where I think it's important to look at query tracker data. I know not everyone likes to use query tracker premium, like it is a paid service and it's just one more thing to ruminate about. But I do find this helpful because you can see, oh, this agent actually is responding to their queries. They're just 6 months behind versus this agent actually doesn't respond to anyone, or they like request right away if they're interested. If it was the latter case, then I would just go ahead and query someone else. If it's someone who's just really behind, you just have to decide if you want to stay in their queue or if you want to withdraw to query a different agent. But I wouldn't leave that query out for the person that's behind because they are going to get to it.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. Zilla, you've got a loud face. What are
I
you
have a
thinking?
loud face because I've broken this rule more than once and don't feel bad about it at all, to be honest with you. I've I've had a query out with someone who's just gotten really behind, and then someone else has opened, and I'm like, well, you know what? Like, it's fine. I'm just gonna do it. And then actually they ended up getting back to me like within a week apart. Um, but honestly, like as long as it's and honestly with the no from one, if they don't read it, I withdraw and query someone else. Like with PS Literary, if you
Love
don't
that.
respond, I don't know that you read it. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So how am I supposed to be like,
And
that's a no?
yeah. You can get away with this if one of them is email, one of them is query
Yeah,
manager, or they are both email without a shared inbox. The shared inbox does make that tricky.
I have
Um,
done it with a shared inbox.
but yeah, those are yeah. Yeah, just
Bold.
with shared inbox, you don't do it 2 days apart,
Oh yeah, no, for
you
sure.
spread it out a
I
little bit more.
actually ended up doing it
They're not
with
gonna
a
remember
shared
everything, I guess.
inbox, and the agent was like, I love this, but I already have something. I'm gonna refer you to the agent I had already queried.
Mm.
And he was like, I already have something too, like it's good. So it's still a rejection there and super kind, but you know what? Like you have to figure out what your comfort level is. I tended to be a little bit riskier the longer I stayed in the trenches. And
You get impatient.
yeah, it's
Yeah, you're
impatient.
not going to jail if you mess up the rules. Like
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
just like
There is
try
no
to be
querying jail.
respectful, but yeah, there's no query jail. One time I accidentally queried the same agent. This was an email query, so no query manager for him to yell at me. I queried the same agent 2 days apart because I forgot to write down in my spreadsheet that I queried her.
Oh,
Um,
It just
and it's
happens.
fine. It's fine.
And
yeah.
honestly,
It does. And then I just sent a quick follow up that was like, sorry, you can disregard the duplicate.
and
Yeah.
agents most
Yep.
of the time will not care. And if they really want to make us think about it, like
Mhm.
that's not someone I
They're probably not the agent
personally
for
want
you.
to work with. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the worst they can do? Send me 2 form rejections?
yeah.
Please.
Yeah, exactly. I got form rejections after I was agented, and I withdrew all my queries that were still out there. I'm like, what are you doing? I think that's a thing that happens to everybody is
Yep.
getting rejections after you've already signed your contract. It's like, okay, well, thanks, but no thanks. We're good. Um, so especially for those who are looking at querying for the first time and are I'm going to call baby queriers, the way you usually submit to an agent, this is probably what we should have talked about first, but whatever, is you have your query letter, which usually follows what we call the hook, the book, and the cook format. So you
Ooh.
have kind of your what we call your metadata, which is your word count, what genre your book is, the name of your book, comparative or competitive titles. So basically books that would be shelved next to yours if they were on a shelf. Um, and a hooky piece of information if you want to have that in there. You have your book, which is usually 2 to 3 paragraphs. It does vary depending on genre, things like that. So for me, I write romantic fantasy. So mine was 1 paragraph from female main character, 1 paragraph from male main character, and then combining the two. So it was a paragraph book section. So this is what your query is. It's almost like what you would read on the back of a book. It's the book blurb. And then you have your cook, which is your bio. So for a lot of people, this does not need to be that intense. It's just something to make you slightly memorable. If you have writing credits, so if you've been published for short story magazines, or if you are somebody who was previously agented and you're back in the trenches, you would say that there, things like that. But it's just a little bit about you. This is usually going to be the smallest part of your query because for querying as a fiction author, the book is always going to be the primary thing. You can't sell a book, or you shouldn't be able to sell a book just based on the strength of, author credentials. Whereas for nonfiction, that needs to be quite a bit higher because that's how you sell it is expertise in the field. How would you guys kind of break this hook book cook format, if at all?
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm waiting for Zilla to talk here because I
I
know she
always
did.
have opinions. It's so bad.
Well, I just know you broke this.
Oh, I
You're
absolutely
like
broke
the
this.
I have
query
this many full
mastermind.
requests.
Annie, you go ahead.
I don't really break out of the format. I would say like the biggest query rule that I break is with comps, which I think is another topic, but I like to be pretty straightforward with it. Um, I just don't really have a reason to break out of it.
It's nice for agents to be able to scan your query and know where to look for what and find the important information that they need.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's to your benefit, I think, to follow this overall structure. I know Zilla put some extra information in her queries that I think she could talk about.
Yeah, I think for the most part, you start with that structure,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if I'm reading in an inbox, which I have done, and I don't see that format, it makes it very difficult for me to follow, to make an opinion about are you breaking the rule because you know what you're doing, or are you breaking the rule because you have no idea? And honestly, that does become pretty
Yeah,
apparent.
amateur hour.
Yes. And it is apparent, the more you read into that. But for me, I did start with
My book comps to the Bible and
I've
to
seen it,
Harry
I've
Potter.
to
seen it,
Harry Potter. Yeah,
I've seen it all.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I started with that, and then I didn't personalize any of mine, which I don't know if we're going to talk about later, but I didn't personalize anything unless they had requested from a pitch event, and then I just made sure I put the link
yeah.
somewhere. Um, I have started with the actual book instead of the hook, but for the query that actually got me my agent, it went um, metadata. Then I had like a hooky through line, and then I went into my book, and then I um, went into how many requests I had, and I actually name dropped the agencies. Um, and I started doing this when I had about 4 to 5 requests. Um, and then at some point it was just too long, and I had to condense it to the number plus
The standout
editors.
agencies.
Well, no, I
Zilla problems. Too many
too
Oh
many
yeah,
requests.
requests.
yeah.
And honest,
The dream.
this it wasn't a dream when you're like, why is no one reading? Um,
Yeah.
but I do think that it has started to be a thing that people are including. I don't, there are some agents who like it, some agents who don't. It's just kind of a risk that you have to figure out if you're comfortable with. I knew that I had a strong query. I knew that I had a really strong like query package in general. So I wasn't afraid to take some of those risks, and then like Anna, some comp risks as well.
And I think that including that kind of comes from like nudging UK
Hmm.
agents. Because for anybody who doesn't know this, you don't do this for American agents or anywhere outside of the UK really, but UK agents want to be nudged if you receive a full request or more full requests from other agents or agencies. So if you got a full request from Triada US, and you had a query out with Janklow Nesbitt UK, they want you to email them and say, hey, I have received a request. You don't necessarily have to put who it was from or what agency it was from. I started including that because of Zilla's success. And I didn't get any UK requests, so like it is what it is. But that is something that I think has bled over from querying UK agents, is making its way into more query letters as a result.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like it's a way to just say, like, hey, pay attention, like, this is something that has merit in the industry. And with, like, so many queries in the inbox, it's really great shorthand to say, like, this is worth your time.
Can I,
Like, for,
sorry.
yeah, go ahead, Zilla.
Um, I will say that I did this for American agents only. For UK agents, I did not
Mm,
include this, and I always sent another email to have another reason to be in their inbox.
it's
Because they
great,
always want
too.
you to put it in the subject line so that they actually see it, because they're not actually reading
Mm-hmm.
your query email until they have a reason to.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is crummy, but it is what it is. Um, okay. Do you guys have any other querying rules that you would kind of bend or break?
Well, do we want to talk about comps?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, yes, comps. Let's do comps.
Okay, so
So,
I'll let you do your thing, Ivy.
okay. Oh, it's okay. So comps are shorthand for either comparative or competitive titles. So, like I said, it is essentially where your book would place on the bookshelf. You can comp generally, so you can say, in the style of this, or sorry, you can say it's a combination of blank meets blank. You can comp specific elements. I will say for me, I know my comps for my week as part of my query. Um, I comp specific elements. So I was comping, for example, the atmosphere of Blood Over Bright Haven and the humor of Nettle and Bone. That's about where it kind of hit. The general rules for comps is you want something that is selling well, but it's not a bestseller. So if, for example, in the fantasy space, comping to Brandon Sanderson is idiotic. Comping to somebody that nobody has ever heard of is also idiotic. You want somewhere that's in the middle. And if you look it up, there's some things where people can kind of guess that based on Goodreads. There are websites that have information on how many copies of a book is sold, but you can usually kind of guesstimate it based on how many reviews there are in Goodreads as to whether it's mid. Those are the stated rules. Oh, and it's supposed to be within 5 years. Um, because you're looking at recent things. It's supposed to be books. Um, some people are more conservative with the time length as well. And some people say 2 to 3 years, and it's like, oh my God, what? But those are the general rules for your competitive or comparable titles. How do we break these rules?
Well, we break them for sure. Um, I love to break comp rules. I think it's good to have a range of comps. Like I always like to have one comp that is following all the rules, and for me that is The Possession of Alba Diaz by Isabel Cañas, because that came out this past year, so it's super fresh. It's the same genre. It's like gothic, historical. It's doing well, but it's not like the biggest name in the genre. So that's my comp that says I follow the rules and I know what's going on. But I like to have comps that are maybe non-books, maybe really big books, maybe even outside my genre. And the point of those comps is to paint a complete picture of what the story is about, but also to show that it's got legs. For me, my book is upmarket. A lot of the people who've read it say things like, I don't really normally read horror, but I love this. And so I'm trying to show that, like, this is a horror book, but
Cross
it's
genre appeal.
yeah, it's not like capital H horror. It's good for people who maybe are dabbling. So my other comps that I've been using are Hamnet, which came out 6 years ago, was a huge book, is also not a horror book, but it's a great comp for me, and has the movie that just came out.
And it's
Um,
big because of the movie, so it's a
yep,
good kind of name grabber for you.
exactly. And it's like there's a lot that's in common with my book. Um, Another comp that I have used in the past, but I'm actually taking it out of my query letter, is Nosferatu, the 2024 remake. I just love that movie. and I've had success using that for pitch contests. I'm taking it out of my query letter because I'm using another rule breaking comp instead, which is Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman, which came out 10 years ago and was out of print, but it's getting a reprint this year. It like blew up on social media in 2025. It's another plague book. My book is about the plague, and that kind of shows like the medieval horror aspect. So I've got my straightforward following the rules comp. I've got my non-genre comp that like really sets the tone, and then I've got the medieval horror. So again, only one of those is following the rules. But both of the rule breaking comps were suggested by my mentor, so I'm considering
Yep,
them industry approved.
absolutely. And I just want to add a quick thing too. If you are comping in a pitch event, these rules don't apply. Comp
Oh
whatever.
yeah,
I was comping Pirates of the Caribbean for my current whip in pitch events.
oh yeah.
I maybe wouldn't have done that in a query. I never had to write a query for this book because I'm agented now, so who knows. But pitch events don't apply. You can do whatever you want for pitch
Yeah.
events.
I'm probably going to start comping Wuthering Heights and pitch events. Just because why not? You can
Yeah,
pitch
why not?
events, the rules go out the window.
Yeah, exactly. It's whatever's going to get attention and potentially get you those likes so you could send the requested queries.
Attention in an accurate way. Like, you want to be able
Yes.
to think of, like, what's the X meets Y that's going to describe your book, and people are going to get it like that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Zilla, how would you break comp rules?
Oh, comps. They're my favorite thing to break. Think they're also the thing that I changed the most when I was querying. So instead of putting in like a personalization line like you're looking for this, I would change my comps. Um, but and I use way more than I need to. I use a lot of comps in my query letter, whereas you really only need 2 to 3 at the most. I think I have 5 in here. Um, but my approved comps would be Stephen Graham Jones' My Heart is a Chainsaw, Jenny Kiefer's This Wretched Valley, and then Nick Cutter's The Handyman Method. But I also use things like Scream, The Haunting of Bly Manor. I use The Shining. I previously for my dystopian used um, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, which is breaking in a lot of different ways because number one, it's not the first in a series. Um, and it's this huge book that got a movie like right off, and it's like a phenomenon, right? But the agent that I sent this to loved this book so much and actually commented on how it's a perfect comp for me. So I think breaking these comp rules is totally worth it if you know you're backing it up and there's a really good reason for doing it. I think that goes along with anything you can break in a query letter. Like, if you're good enough, an agent's gonna want you anyway.
Yeah. And actually, something I should probably mention about queries is usually you also send a writing sample. There are some agents who don't want a writing sample with it, but that's the thing. You're sending your first, usually it's your first 10 pages. It can be five. Some agents want, 3 chapters, 50 pages, whatever. I found the most common for me was 10 pages. I don't know about you guys, but the agent is going to see if you are backing up what you are selling. There are some agents who don't read the query, they check out the writing style first and then go back to read the query. So they read them in different orders and all these sorts of things. If you back it up with your writing, you can pretty much get away with anything.
Now, that being said, did you ever send more pages than like 10, 15, whatever they ask for?
I did not. I sometimes in Query Manager, it was never more than like a few paragraphs because I got to like a nice kind of quippy line to end it on, and it was like 3 paragraphs down. I also made sure that I went into Word, and I turned off widows and orphan control so that I got as many words as I could possibly get in those 10 pages. Um, I mostly did that for if it was a 5-page thing and I would add that like extra 2 paragraphs on. But I made sure that my entire first chapter was 10 pages long. So that when I was querying, it was always the entire first chapter, which ends on a funny thing. I think it encompasses a number of different things about my book where it has like elements of darkness and then it has like the funny thing at the end. And it's like, again, this is what I am. So I was very, very intentional querying that my first chapter was exactly like 10 pages. I think it was a few paragraphs shy of like going over on page 11, but I made sure it never ever, no matter how much I edited it, went over that, so that it was always my default.
Sometimes I'd actually send less. I forget the exact like page count, but when I was first querying Banshee, I had a really big cliffhanger. I want to say it was like page 14 or something. So if an agent asked for 15 pages, I would just send 14 pages because I would want them to get to the end and be like, "What? Where's the rest?"
That's great.
I think it's also important to keep in mind this would be like in the query tracker form, or if you're pasting it into an email. Some agents rarely will ask you to like upload a Word document. In that case, I stick to the pages. But if you're just pasting it into the form or an email, they're not seeing how many pages it is. So as long as you're in the arena, if you're a little longer or shorter, they're not going to know.
I would also say that if somebody was requesting like 3 chapters or the first 50 pages, I would usually default to what was longer, or what had like the quippier kind of end.
Yeah, what's the most compelling? Like, I'm very proud of myself in this draft of Banshee because there's a great, huge cliffhanger on page 50. So I think that's awesome for me.
We love it. We love it.
Yeah.
I've definitely sent like up to 3 or 4 pages over and have no remorse. Zero remorse for that.
I love you as a querier. You're so funny. It's the things you do. And it's
And
like, it clearly works
Well, and
before.
listen,
Yeah, you
But
just
that's the
want
thing,
to
she
like
had the goods to back it up.
stay in the realm.
they're gonna stop
Like, if
reading.
they're asking for 10 pages, don't send them a 20.
Right. But they're gonna stop reading when they stop reading. And it's usually if they're gonna request more, they're usually gonna get to the end. If they're not gonna request more, they're usually not gonna get to the end. So for me, because I have a lot of faith in myself, for better or worse, I was more than willing to be like, okay, on page 13 instead of 10, even though my first chapter is definitely 10 pages, just for this example, I would definitely stay like 13 pages and send on that quippy cliffhanger moment.
That's so true, because if they're into it, they're not going to be mad that you sent more.
Yep.
They're going to enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's a good point. They will always keep reading if they're interested. Then they'll be like, more.
If it's not
But
for
yeah,
them, they probably just read the first page or two anyways.
and honestly, probably less. When you see like agents at those conferences where they read the first page and they put their hand up for when they would stop reading, it's usually in the first paragraph. But I'm going to quote Brandon Sanderson so much, and I'm sorry, but he has this comparison where it's like if you have somebody who's been playing piano for 20 years and somebody who's been playing it for 2 months, you are going to know who is who within the first few notes. Same for agents. This is their job. Their job is to read books, is to read this. You will know who is good and who is not good in those first sentences. And then it's okay, if you're reading past that, it's are they for you? Is the style for you? Is what they're selling for you? It's more of a taste thing rather than an actual quality.
Yeah. I think the concept plays a lot in here. Like, once you're at that baseline level of, like, you can write good, they want to know that the idea is for them, which is why having a book concept that is really strong is very important in the query trenches.
Okay, so I think that brings us to our last final thing, which is personalization. I did not personalize many of my queries. The query I sent to my agent was not personalized. Or to my now agent was not personalized. I only really sent it if I had something significant to say, like if there was a few where I did it based on MSWL matches, but it was like more of a niche thing, and I'm like, no, I have all these different things for you. There were some where it's like if I listened to them on podcast and I like had a thing for that, I could call back to that. Or if, like Zilla said, it was a pitch event, like, which usually, especially in Query Manager, there's a box for that where it's like, if this is a pitch event, like, say it there, so you always put it in the box as well. But I did personalize most of my queries.
I personalized a little bit. I don't really think it's worth it. Like, I've never gotten a full request from being like, I'm querying you because I love your podcast. Like, or even like, I would personalize some queries to say like, because of your interest in gothic horror, whatever. I don't think it's really even worth doing that. I think you should just demonstrate that your book is for them by maybe making tweaks to your metadata. So, for example, if they call out that they are looking for like monstrous women, then that's something that I would just make sure to work into my metadata. Or, like Zilla said, swapping out comps. If I have an alternative comp that is something that's on their list, I'll pop that one in there. Um, I feel like the full requests I've gotten for the most part have been on queries that don't have any type of like outward personalization.
Yeah. The closest I got to personalization was I had different metadata paragraphs, which I'm actually just remembering I did now. And it was kind of depending on what the agent was looking for. If they were looking for more romanticy, I had one that highlighted the romance more. I had um, romantic fantasy, and then I had straight fantasy, where I would highlight kind of different elements of the book and what I would label the genre as, because I feel like I straddle that line really well, so it could theoretically go either way depending on the agent. That was the main personalization I did, but I just had that like stocked in a doc, and I would just copy whichever one I needed at the time. So it wasn't like rewriting it every single time.
Yeah. I mean, I've already answered this, but I think that personalizing, there's only one query I've ever sent that I think actually got me a full request because of the personalization, and it was because I comped um one of her clients and a very unlikable main character that was very controversial at the time with readers and even Kirkus. Um, but I really think that that's what got me the request. But every other one, and I've queried over 300 times over
Mhm.
my books.
Yeah.
So I really just don't think that it's worth time unless you're pasting in that link for a pitch event or whatever it is.
Now, when you personalize for the like client book, did you just go ahead and comp the book, or did you say like I'm querying you because your client's book is similar to mine because of XYZ?
I went ahead and called it out. I said and I'll go ahead and say it because I love this book and I think it needs more love. All right, so the book is it's M.K. Lobb's Seven Faceless Saints, and the main character in that is so unlikable. It has really divided readers. And I thought that my main character was also very similarly unlikable and very selfish, and I loved that about her. And actually, the agent also really enjoyed that. I use MK Lob for a lot of things. She's also a unicorn, and in my eyes, just absolutely killed the querying game. If you ever want to look up her querying story, it's amazing.
Okay, so ending our querying rules in which can be bent or broken. Do we have a final piece of advice, maybe one from each of us, on heading into the querying trenches, especially for our baby queryers?
Well, my number one piece of advice would be to just start writing the next thing. This is what I did. I think it's a great distraction while you're in the trenches. It also keeps you from getting like jaded and bitter. I think it's easy to fall into really negative patterns when you're querying, especially if that's the only thing that you have going on. So if you're working on the next thing, it gives you something to feel like you're making progress on. If you're like me, you might even realize that the next thing is like way more viable than the project you're currently querying. But either way, if you're looking to make writing a career, I think this is a great practice to start getting into.
Yeah. So especially once you have a book deal, you are going to be drafting your next thing and editing the old thing at the same time, particularly if it's a multi-book deal and you're now working on a deadline for the first time. So I think getting used to always working on the next thing is a great idea. And especially for you, it worked out so well because you really found what kind of your author brand is. And that's only going to benefit you in the long run. And I think even if your first book had been picked up, you're going to debut much stronger with this new one, having kind of read it. My advice is when you think you are ready, especially if it is your first book, put it away and don't look at it for a month, then take it back out. Go over it one more time, and you are going to find so many things that are actually wrong with it, especially if you haven't taken breaks from it before. I edited my book once while I was in the trenches. Just I had gotten a little bit of feedback. I ended up cutting an extra 2,000 words. I made my first chapter way stronger and it hit a lot harder. And that was the version I sent to my agent as a query. So I think taking a break from your book and then coming back to it can be really helpful, particularly if you've been working on it for a very long time. You're no longer seeing the forest for the trees. So,
I think for me, it's going to be to stay humble because we're not good enough to get published. That's why we're not published yet. And I think that it kind of goes back to you've got to continue to level up. You've got to take classes. You've got to read books. You've got to read not only craft books, but books that are being published right now and not the big names. You've got to read the debuts. What did they have that maybe you can continue to work on? So continue to level up with your sentence structure, like everything Anna talked about. And then when you go into your querying, know know what you're bringing to the table. You're not just bringing a book. You're bringing a story that focuses on this perspective. You're bringing this message to readers. So I think you just have to remember like you're not good enough yet, and that's okay. You just have to keep going.
where your market niche is, where you'd be placed on the shelves, and all that sort of thing. Because your querying is your first chance or first opportunity to market
Yeah.
yourself. That is what you are essentially doing, is you are showing agents, hey, this is where I would sit on the bookshelves. This is who you can sell me to. Because you want agents to be reading your thing and being like, okay, I know these editors are looking for this and I could sell it to them in this way. You want agents' business brain to turn on and not just the reader brain to turn on. There are so many books that people write. There are so many books that are good, are passable. Good and passable is not enough to get published in today's landscape.
Or even agented.
Or agented, absolutely. You are not owed an agent. You are not owed a book deal, and it sucks. You have to get good, whether that's reading and absorbing the information through osmosis, whether that's doing an absolute asinine amount of research. There are so many things you can be doing to do that. And sitting in the query trenches going, oh, woe is me, and never writing the next thing, like Anna said, is not going to get you to where you need to be. Art is not the same as business, and book publishing specifically is a little bit of both, and you have to be thinking about both.
And I think this actually leads me into perfectly my hot take for today, if we're ready.
I am so ready. I've never been more ready.
Since this is our first episode, I just want to say we are going to rotate who is bringing publishing tea for the group this our every week, and we do not know what it is beforehand. So Zilla is going to introduce our topic, and we do not know what it is, and you will get our live rage reactions.
So I had to think very carefully about what my tea was going to be for the first episode because we have so many topics planned, and I didn't want to bring anything up that we weren't ready for. And so that kind of left me with speculating on what the writing community is right now. And for me, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Twitter, I'm in like 1,000 different writing discords. I watch writing Twitch and writing YouTube and like all of these different places. And the one thing that I've noticed that I think we need to talk about for our publishing tea today is how many people feel like they are good enough before they are entitled to an agent and actually take that blame of them not getting to that next milestone and put it on the agent or the editor or the publishing industry in general instead of turning it on themselves to work. So,
How can I get better? It's not that mindset. It's, yeah, everything's wrong with the world,
yep.
even though it continues to function
So
fine.
my hot take today
Yeah.
is the majority of writing community that we are seeing right now, they are not good enough and they will never be good enough to actually get published.
I think the people who actually end up getting published, and we're saying this, we haven't been published. None of us have been published or have book deals or anything like that. So we are in the unpublished group. We are part of you. The odds are against you,
Mm-hmm.
and it sucks.
Yeah, but you control how you can react to the odds. Like, I totally agree with everything that's being said, and I think statistically it's completely true. There's only a certain amount of books that publishers can take on every year. Beyond that, there's only a certain amount of agents. And then there's only a certain amount of books that agents are requesting. And the way that you can make sure that you're one of those people who succeed is just by being persistent and keeping going, staying humble. I think
Don't take it personal.
Yeah, don't take it personal. Like, it's a business, and like any other career, you have to put your time in.
And I think it's not just time, but you have to really educate yourself on what the landscape looks like. You can't exist in this bubble and say, I think I'm super talented. because it doesn't matter if you're talented because so many other people are.
Yeah, I think there's all this messaging when you're a new writer that is it comes from a good place because it's meant to encourage people to keep going and finish that draft. And they'll say like everyone in the world wants to write a book, but only 3% of people actually finish one or whatever it is. So just by finishing a book you're exceptional. And like that's true when it comes to base personal development, but like then you get through that and you start querying and you realize, oh, all these other people wrote books too. And so there's so much more than just like knowing how to write a book. It's you have to learn how to write a good book and it can take a lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you have to, there's so many people who want to be a writer and do not read. And it
Mm.
drives me, that's like one of my pet peeves because it's
Or do not write.
why don't you love books? Is that not why you're here? Like, and you absorb that stuff through osmosis. It's not just grammar, and I think this is something that people struggle with writing specifically. You wouldn't get this for musicians. Is everybody to greater or lesser degrees is literate. So everyone thinks that they can write a book. Now, again, greater to lesser degrees for literacy. I say as a teacher.
So you also say as a non-American, I don't know about that over here.
Yeah, I am Canadian, so we do have very high literacy levels comparatively. Um, Everyone who can read and write thinks that they can write a book, but it is not the skill of putting words on a paper. It is the skill of storytelling. It is understanding the various plot points that need to be happening. And I say this as a plotter. So Anna and Zilla are both pantsers. They kind of come up with their plot as it comes to them. I need to know where my book is going before I start writing. So I start with an outline and I know what major plot points I need to happen at what point. I know how to make my characters engaging. I know how to make dialogue that pops. And you can't just have one of these things or your book is incredibly flat. Having something that has a start and a the end is not enough. You need to interweave all of these components together to make something that is gripping, compelling, will hook readers and keep them. Because we're competing with so many different media sources these days as well. Why are people going to read your book instead of scrolling TikTok?
Yep. When I was in advertising, it's all about concept and execution. You need to know what's going to be an idea that hooks people, but you also need to know how to write it incredibly well. And both of those things are hard. And most people are not there yet. We're not there yet, which is why we're here working on our skill and working on our craft.
Absolutely. And that's the thing is like I've mentioned it before, I'm going on submission very, very soon. Um, when I got my agent, we did 2 rounds of edits. One of them was large scale. I added an extra chapter, I added an extra scene. And then we did a small scale edit, which was like nitpicking verbiage things. But if I get a book deal, I will edit my book again, possibly several more times with an editor. It is never done. It is never perfect. And there is always, always room to grow. And I've touched on it a few times because I'm working on my second novel now. There are so many things I learned from writing my first book that I'm applying to my second book. And there will be things that I learned from writing my second book that I apply to my third book. And it's always going to get better. And it's always about getting better. You can never be complacent. You are never like, oh, well, I'm good enough. And this is this. You should always, I don't know. I'm a perfectionist. And maybe like there's some people who don't have this mindset, but I feel like why would you be like, okay, this is enough. I'm never going to try and improve again. I'm never going to learn more about how to get better. Especially because, again, like we said, even once you are published, you are competing with all those other books on the shelf. Why is somebody going to pick your book?
So I'd love to break this topic down just a little bit and kind of talk about the stages of writing. So we've all kind of talked about like how we take that process, or we write, we draft, we continue to edit and revise. But what about like how does the writing community itself become complacent in pitch events or the query trenches or with CPs or like I kind of want to talk about the mood in general, and kind of what we're seeing
Hmm.
right now.
I think a lot of it becomes echo chambers. And we see this online where, you join a Facebook group and it all the other people who think the same way as you join that echo group. Are that Facebook group and it becomes an echo chamber where all you're hearing is the same opinions back to you. There is a lot of trying to soothe hurt feelings in writing spaces where somebody goes, oh, well, this agent rejected my book. And, people are trying to make them feel better. So they go, oh, that's their loss. The agent sucks. Rather than, oh, you can't just be like, oh, have you considered that your book sucks?
Yeah, I'm not sure you
That's
can just say that.
social norms and all that. No, but like I I think there's a little bit of that when it comes to the spaces that you surround yourself in, and you have to kind of intentionally choose people that are on the same path of always wanting to be better and make that your core writing group.
Hmm.
You need to be able to take feedback because there are people who absolutely do not and will fight you on every piece of feedback. And it's like, just because somebody says something about my book doesn't mean that I need to apply it. Somebody told me to take all the swearing out of my book because it was controversial.
That would be like
And
all
I'm
of your
like, I'm
book.
right. And it's like literally my character or my main character's first line of dialogue is the word shit. Like, it's that's not what my writing style is. So I know that about myself and I disregarded it. And I know that that's a thing. Like, I read epic fantasy. Yeah, the Wheel of Time doesn't have swear words and stuff in it. Lazen does, Abercrombie does, Game of Thrones does. There is a market for that. I don't need to disregard that. That's just somebody who doesn't read in the genre and doesn't understand what they're kind of going for. But if you're getting multiple readers who are saying this section is boring, it's not gripping me, then you probably need to go look at that. But there's people that don't take feedback well. And I think in this field, you really, really do need to take feedback without taking it personally.
Especially from the professional that you want to sell your book.
Yes, yes, absolutely. If an agent is telling you something, number one, you're very lucky because I think this is a different publishing tea thing, but like, you are not owed feedback from an agent. They have so much to do. They are not going to have time to invest in you for free labor because if they did that to everybody, they wouldn't be able to do their actual jobs. And as somebody who's agented, I want my agent to do her actual job of selling my book. Thank you. Um, Feedback is not guaranteed. It sucks to get a form on full. I understand that. I've gotten forms on fulls. It sucks. On a query, you are owed nothing. And honestly, I don't know if I really want feedback on my entire book from somebody who read the first page, right? But you really, really have to, I think you said this earlier, Zilla, humble yourself. You are not the be all end all of publishing, and you never will be. Odds are you will, statistically, most people will never get published. Most people will never get an agent. Um, And when you do get published, you will probably not be a breakout bestseller. You will probably be somebody who is solidly on the mid list, if that.
That's what I had for tea, was just talking about the reactions that people are getting in the trenches or writing versus not writing, and how the entitlement, I think, especially with writers who have either been stagnant for a while or are newbies, are not changing, I think, with the trenches.
And I think there's a lot of people where it's enabling,
Yeah.
um, kind of that stagnation rather than challenging to grow. And I've seen this expressed rather explicitly from some people where they say, oh, everyone says, tear my book apart, and then they get upset when you do so. So they don't think anybody actually means that when they say tear my book apart. I do mean tear my book apart. If you find a giant plot hole in my book, please tell me because I would rather find out from you so I could fix it rather than find out after I've queried 50 agents or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of mindset things. Yes, of course it sucks to get feedback that your book is not what you thought it was or where you thought it
Hmm.
was.
That's the
That is
industry.
not other people's responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the industry. And you have to then go back and be like, okay, how can I fix this? How can I improve this? Because there's always going to be improvement that you can do. Like if my book gets published, I'm never going to read it again because I'm going to read through it. I'm going to find an issue that I can't fix. Like,
Yep.
if you have thoughts on publishing tea things that you want us to address, feel free to drop in the comments and we will consider it, including with our delight. But if not, we'll address it next season. So we are planning to do 10 episodes in our season one. This was episode one of season one. We will come back. If you have any topics you do want us to address in terms of leveling up our main kind of topic or our publishing team, please let us know. We're happy to do that. You can reach out to us at withseriespotential@gmail.com or you can message us on Substack. That is where we are hosting our podcast from. Thank you for tuning in. We're happy to have you. Please join us next week where we talk about pitch events.
Oh, I'm so excited.
And we'll talk more about how we do those, ways to do it. And like you want to tune in, Anna and Zilla are the pitch events queen. I am not. They will have lots of very, very good, useful information for you. Thank you so much, and we will see you next week.
Bye.